The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Good evening from our CBS newsroom in New York on this, the first broadcast of network television's first daily half-hour news program.
This is Walter Cronkite
reporting from Madrid, from the Great Wall of China.
From Paris, from Moscow.
This is Walter Cronkite aboard the Papal aircraft somewhere over the North Atlantic.
I'm just back from the biggest assignment that any American reporter could have so far in this war.
We have just had, I've been advised, some film in from the Defense Department. This is the Explorer as it is being moved to the gantry. Unfortunately, however, the film seems to be upside down.
Flip polarity, flip polarity, flip polarity. Flip your polarity.
Fortunately, the Explorer went up right side up, and we're going to see it that way.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
It all began the year 1916 in St. Joseph, Missouri, when Walter Cronkite was born to his mother, Helena Cronkite, and his father, Walter Cronkite Sr. His father at the time was a dentist, and his mother managed the home. Not far too long after, Walter and his family of 3 moved to Houston, Texas. It was there that Walter found a magazine article about reporters working around the globe, and that is where his interest first was sparked. In junior high, he decided he wanted to be a reporter, and in high school he worked on the yearbook and school newspaper as preparation. After graduation, Walter attended the University of Texas at Austin, where he studied journalism, political science, and economics. Cronkite already worked part-time as a correspondent for the Houston Post, but during his junior year, he decided to drop out of college and take a full-time job with the Post. In 1939, he moved to Oklahoma City and started working as a radio broadcaster under the name Walter Wilcox. He then moved to Kansas City, Missouri, where he started working for the United Press International. He quickly became one of the top American reporters because of his reports in North Africa and Europe during World War II. In 1942, Walter headed aboard the USS Texas to get coverage on the occupation in North Africa during Operation Torch. He was able to beat his rival reporters back to the U.S. and give the first uncensored report regarding Operation Torch to the United States. This report gave him so much recognition that he was selected by the United States Army Air Forces to be part of a group named the Writing 69th. The Writing 69th was a group of 8 American reporters that were selected to fly with the Air Forces while they did bombing raids over Germany and then report what was in the happenings. During that time, he was able to report on events such as the Battle of the Bulge and Operation Market Garden. And then after the war, Cronkite represented the United States Press and was the chief correspondent for the United Press in the Nuremberg trials. In 1950, Cronkite was employed by CBS News and then became the anchor for all major political happenings, such as the Republican and Democratic national conventions and presidential elections.
When the United States picks its 35th president.
Cronkite started to anchor a few different news programs. Some lasted only a few months, while others aired for decades. Anchoring these shows, along with the 1960 Winter Olympics, helped Cronkite gain relevance, so much so that he advanced Douglas Edwards as anchorman of the first nightly half-hour news broadcasts, the CBS Evening News. The Huntley-Brinkley Report, hosted by Chet Huntley and David Brinkley, was a major rival of CBS's Evening News, but CBS Evening News far surpassed it in views after Cronkite's breaking news report on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. In 1968, Cronkite and his executive producer traveled to Vietnam to cover the fallout of the Tet Offensive. Before he made the trip overseas, Cronkite had always supported American involvement in the conflict. Cronkite reported in a way where he just told what he saw because he wanted the American people to get the utmost truth about major events. So when Cronkite was troubled by the visual images left with him from the trip, he decided he wasn't going to hold back and that he was going to tell the American people what he really saw, and that it was contradictory to what Lyndon B. Johnson and what the other news reporters said was going on overseas. On February 27th, CBS News aired Report from Vietnam, Who, What, When, Where, Why, in which he stated,
"It seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate. But it is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could."
Following the report, President Johnson stated, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America." Shortly after, President Johnson announced he would not be running for a second term.
I think our broadcast had a principal effect on that, but I think it was a straw on the back of a lot of indications that he was unhappy with the progress of the war and thought he himself ought to get out.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
On July 20th, 1969, 53 million households tuned in on their television set to watch the moon landing, 650 million viewers worldwide. And none other than the popular news anchor Walter Cronkite was commentating the major lunar milestone to many of them.
The Eagle has landed.
We're home.
Man on the moon.
Boy.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
There he is. There's a foot coming down the step.
I'm at the foot of the ladder.
Armstrong is on the moon. Neil
Out of all the news broadcasters, Cronkite's broadcast received the best ratings for the landing, and CBS News became the most watched network for the mission. By 1970, Walter Cronkite was the top-rated news reporter in the country, and he was dubbed as the most trusted man in America because of his unbiased reports and his commitment to giving accurate news. Americans turned to him as a reliable source, and he was able to communicate to them many events that changed the course of history. Here are a few of those most notable reports I haven't mentioned yet. The Democratic National Convention in 1968. The death of President Lyndon Johnson in 1973.
Sixth President of the United States died this afternoon.
The civil rights struggles throughout the 1960s. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. The Watergate scandals in 1972. The Iran hostage crisis in 1980 and 1981. The 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant leak in 1979, and the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. His last day in the anchor chair before retiring at CBS was March 6, 1981, and he was then succeeded by Don Rather. Cronkite was perceived as the predominant news voice of America. He described himself as a comfortable old shoe to his audience. They'll always be able to rely on him to get what they need. His integrity as a reporter and anchorman brought him many honorable awards, some of the most notable being the Peabody Award in 1981 and 1963, several Emmy Awards, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom given by Jimmy Carter in 1981. Cronkite genuinely cared about rendering news to the American people and made sure that they were aware of and understood the pivotal happenings of the time. He refused to let his personal beliefs get in the way of reporting accurate news, and his integrity has influenced and changed the way that so many reporters communicate their stories worldwide.
This is my last broadcast as the anchorman of the CBS Evening News. For me, it's a moment for which I long have planned, but which nevertheless comes with some sadness. For almost 2 decades, after all, we've been meeting like this in the evenings, and I'll miss that. But those who have made anything of this departure, I'm afraid, have made too much. This is but a transition, a passing of the baton. A great broadcaster and gentleman, Doug Edwards, preceded me in this job, and another, Dan Rather, will follow. And anyway, the person who sits here is but the most conspicuous member of a superb team of journalists, writers, reporters, editors, producers, and none of that will change. Old anchormen, you see, don't fade away. They just keep coming back for more. And that's the way it is. Friday, March 6, 1981.